Ibrahim Traoré has done the unthinkable, forced the West back to the negotiating table, without firing a single shot. When the coup plotters fled, people thought he was lucky. But no, Traoré has shaken two worlds, one a Western alliance accustomed to giving orders, the other a Burkina Faso demanding self-determination through blood and memory. They don't understand why Denmark, which once slammed the door on diplomacy, quietly returned to Ouagadougou. They don't understand why Cuba, still under blockade, sent a medical and diplomatic team to the Sahel without hesitation. Is something bigger going on? A new axis forming? A soft revolution, but deeper and more dangerous than artillery? If you sense it, like, comment and subscribe. Because from the next part, you'll understand, Traoré is not just changing the landscape of Africa. You are rewriting the world map. We will no longer stand aside. Burkina Faso is leading a new era. And we want to be there. Informal statement by a Danish envoy in Ouagadougou, May 2025. Just a few weeks after the failed coup in Burkina Faso, two shocking diplomatic signals appeared. Cuba sent a high-level delegation to Ouagadougou declaring unconditional support for the Traoré government. Denmark, which had declared its withdrawal from the Sahel, unexpectedly reactivated dialogue relations. Not a single bullet was fired. But a new battlefield had opened. At its center, a single man. And that is when the story really began. A third of the world stood watching. A third turned away. The rest marched towards Traoré. He did not die. A week after the bloody coup, Ibrahim Traoré appeared in public, not on screen, but among thousands of people. No armor. No shield. Only eyes like blades and a deep voice, speaking to the world in the only language a betrayed people understands: we do not bow. In that moment, Burkina Faso's story shifted. From a small country beset by civil war, to the center of a continent-wide political earthquake. For there was one thing no one had counted on: when all assassination attempts fail, it is the survivor who becomes the symbol. They wanted to take down a symbol, but instead created an empire. The April 2025 coup, cloaked in vague names like spontaneous military response or attempt to save the republic, was in fact a coordinated plan involving mercenaries, bribed insiders, and mysterious offshore funding. They didn't want to retake the country. They wanted only one thing: to cut off the head of the snake. What they didn't understand was, Burkina Faso no longer had a single head. Traoré had implanted himself in the heart of every soldier, every child, every mother in the market. When he was attacked, the whole the country woke up. When they were silent, they spoke up. In less than 72 hours, civilians blocked the rebel supply lines. University students took over the airwaves to call for international condemnation of the intervention. Loyal commandos launched a campaign to turn the tide. The world witnessed something strange. No one gave orders. There was no commander-in-chief. But an entire nation acted as if awakened by a common signal. Cuba and Denmark, two flags of different colors, touched the same Burkina land. Shortly after the event, two special flights landed in Ouagadougou. The first arrived from Havana, carrying a team of defense advisors, logistics experts, doctors, and a clear message: we are not sending soldiers. We are sending people who have lived through sieges, blockades, and rebellions. We know where you are. The second was from Copenhagen, an event that seemed unlikely. A Danish delegation, which had announced its severance of ties with the Sahel by the end of 2023, suddenly appeared with a shocking proposal: if Traoré really survives, we want to resume dialogue. It's not Western remorse. It's fear. A figure who was once called immortal just survived. A country that almost collapsed got back up without anyone to help. A region once called the black hole of humanity, now a magnet for Cuba and Scandinavia. It's not politics anymore. It's the physics of power. Why a small country can overturn the world. Three things kept Traoré alive, and, in turn, changed the game. He didn't just rule, he inspired. Traoré didn't build his empire with money, but with emotion. Every speech, every action, touched the collective memory of people who had been hungry, who had been trampled by mercenaries, who had dreamed of real leadership. The system is not in the capital, it is in each checkpoint, each local unit. The counter-coup does not come from the center, but from a pre-established network, local commanders trained in the ideology of strategic decentralization. The appeal of a man who is both a soldier, a symbol, and a survival target. A leader who walked through bombs, slept in barracks on the front lines, refused to live in exile to stay in the midst of fire. How can people not risk their lives to keep such a symbol? The return is not just physical, it's psychological. The day Traoré reappeared, the image spread across the continent. TV stations from Mali, Guinea, Niger reported it. The hashtag Traoré Lives Again topped the African trend for 5 days. A new wave began to emerge, not from politicians, not from intellectuals, but from the continent's Gen Z generation. Those who were once called digitally unemployed, post-colonial disorientation, the apolitical generation, now see a man who is unlike any leader before him. Not stereotyped like the old leaders. Not asking for aid like the previous generation. Not speaking French like a dependent. But standing there, in the middle of the storm, and saying, I am not going anywhere. And now, the whole world must turn to one question: who is behind Traoré? Because no one survives a coup alone. No one can stand alone against 3 forces. Rebel soldiers equipped. Inside network. International media simultaneously cut off the air for 72 hours. So who kept Traoré alive? Who sheltered, led, counterattacked? And why, right after that, Cuba and Denmark, 2 non-aligned countries, appeared together? That question is not just curiosity. It was a hint at a new chapter for Africa. The story did not stop at survival. Because after that, Traoré did not just re-establish power, he began to act. He did not call for revenge. He did not organize a purge. He announced a plan to rebuild security and foreign relations with shocking partners, Cuba, Denmark, and others who had never appeared before. In the dusty Ouagadougou, there was a single place as calm as the eye of a storm. In a small room heavily guarded by special forces, 3 men sat facing each other. There was no media. No flag table. No ceremony. Just looks, through each other, as if knowing what was coming. The Cuban representative was someone who had been in Angola in 1987. The Danish representative, who had been the African envoy before being withdrawn because of Ouagadougou's overly independent atmosphere. And Traoré, the youngest in the room, sat there like an unshakable pillar of stone between 2 civilizations that had faced each other during the Cold War. No one spoke first. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 3 minutes. Finally, Traoré put his teacup down on the table, and spoke in a voice that did not tremble, neither high nor low, but seemed to draw the whole Sahel in. We will not choose sides. But if anyone comes here with respect, not with a noose, not with a flag, then we will listen. Cuba, blood memories and unfading loyalty. The Cuban delegation was the first to respond. They did not use diplomatic language. They did not begin with the words agreement or cooperation. The leader simply nodded. We are here because Fidel promised, Africa will not be alone. They opened the briefcase, but there was nothing inside except an old album. In it were photos of Cuban soldiers fighting in Angola, Mozambique, Ethiopia. There was also a blur. The young man in the photo was the Cuban commander sitting here today. He pointed to the photo, looked at Traoré, and said slowly, history is not just a story. It is a command for those who survive. Cuba did not bring much money. No sophisticated weapons. But they brought another asset, memories. They said they would send medical experts, technical trainers, and especially professors, to help Burkina Faso build its own defense university independent of the West. Traoré nodded. No signatures. No declarations. Just words. Denmark, from estrangement to connection. Unlike Cuba, the Danish delegation came with a skeptical eye. Their government had not officially recognized Traoré's transitional government. The Nordic media called him a warlord. But the strange thing was, the delegation came anyway. The Danish representative did not begin with an excuse, but with a question. If Africa does not need the West, then what does Africa need? A razor-sharp question. The room fell silent. But Traoré was not angry. He simply asked. If the West does not need to impose, then would you dare to abandon the conditional aid mechanism? There was a long pause, then the Danish representative smiled. A smile, not of satisfaction, but because he saw what he needed to see. Burkina Faso was not playing the victimization game. They were rewriting the rules of the game. Denmark proposed a joint agricultural research program, no strings attached, no immigration policy attached. They were ready to support digital villages in the Sahel, but they asked for access to field data. Traoré did not answer right away. He turned to the Cuban representative. Is it possible to create a common data center, managed by Africa? The question was not directed at Denmark. But the very fact of not turning away from them was Traoré's way of testing his patience. The Nordic representative understood. He wrote down 2 words in his notebook: wait. The tension between the two poles, and Traoré was at the center of the whirlpool. The meeting lasted 6 hours. No documents were signed. No press releases were issued. But a silent alliance was born, an alliance of respect, intelligence and non-dependence. Outside, the West watched closely. France was uneasy with Cuba. The US was suspicious of Denmark. NATO was silent. Russia, not showing up, as if wanting Traoré to take the first step himself. And the scariest thing about the old system, these 3 sides, no one was against anyone else. They were just building, without asking permission. Over the next month, a series of unusual signals appeared. A team of Cuban medical experts was rushed to the war-affected provinces of Burkina Faso, without media notification. The University of Ouagadougou too opened a new department of applied satellite technology, with funding from a Nordic fund. A former Danish colonel asked for early retirement, then flew to Bobo Dioulasso to teach English to military cadets. Each of these small events did not create an earthquake. But together, they were opening a path. Not a path that depends on the Russia-China axis. Nor a path that follows the Western aid path. But a soft axis, both flexible and steadfast. Revolving around a core, Traoré and the idea of self-determination. In the world of geopolitics, the scariest thing is not weapons, but the right to refuse. When you dare to refuse an aid package attached to IMF reform. When you refuse to attend a conference without being properly invited. When you refuse to share population data with the European Union. Then you are no longer a pawn. You are a player. And Burkina Faso, under Traoré, is learning the rules of the game very quickly. Connected, but not tied. What is special is, Traoré is not anti-globalization. He is not closed like North Korea. On the contrary, he invites countries to come. But with one principle. No one comes here with chains. Whoever brings chains, wears them and goes home. Cuba understands. Denmark is beginning to understand. And other countries, from Brazil, Indonesia, to Kazakhstan, are also knocking on the door, with new questions. How to cooperate without dominating. How to share without monitoring. How to accompany without being a controller. Burkina Faso, a small country, is teaching the world a big lesson. The story does not stop at a few handshakes. Or diplomatic statements. No. What is happening in Burkina Faso is a direct challenge to the global order. And when Denmark, a NATO country, and Cuba, a symbol of defiance against the United States, come together in Ouagadougou, none of the old gatekeepers of the world can sit idly by. The West is panicking. Intelligence reports are being pushed to Washington, Paris, Brussels by the hour. The name, Ibrahim Traoré, is no longer an African phenomenon. It has crossed all borders. It has become a symbol of a new order, emerging from the ashes of colonialism. Traoré is creating an unprecedented alliance. It goes beyond geopolitics, it is an alliance of countries that were once considered obsolete. Confidential report of the European Institute for Strategic Studies, June 2025. Invisible battlefield, economy, information, internal. When nuclear weapons and drones cannot intervene openly, the attacks begin with softer, but no less destructive, things. The French central bank suddenly refuses liquidity to financial institutions that have done business with Ouagadougou. The International Monetary Fund (IMF) warns of serious investment risks in Burkina Faso. A series of old opposition figures, once silent, suddenly appeared on international television, calling Traoré the young dictator. But the most dangerous blow did not come from abroad. It came from within. Several senior generals had their files leaked, showing that they had close ties to Western agencies. Several civilian figures, once considered intellectuals supporting the youth movement, quietly disappeared from Ouagadougou overnight. On underground forums, the keyword, treasonous plot, skyrocketed. Traoré knows it. And he does not keep quiet. I am not afraid of those who carry guns. I am afraid of those who have surrendered long ago. Disguised as friends. Ibrahim Traoré, speaking to the Provisional National Assembly, June 2025. The top-secret meeting, 3 days before the storm. On June 17, at an underground military base on the outskirts of Ouagadougou, a closed-door meeting that has never been officially announced took place. Present. A representative of the Cuban military. A Danish strategic advisor, who led operations in the Baltics. A special envoy from Mali and Niger. And of course, Traoré, who held the center of the battlefield. The meeting lasted nearly 8 hours. No press, no pictures. But what was clear afterward was that a new alliance, without a name, without a flag, had been born. We are not signing papers. We are signing a joint commitment, none of us will be crushed again. Leaked internal notes after the meeting, published by Le Monde source anonymous. Burkina is no longer a poor country with resources. It was immediately after this meeting that the steps that shocked the world began. Burkina Faso announced a project to develop a national IT infrastructure with technical support from Cuba, which has experience in developing independent networks under embargo conditions. Denmark sent experts in renewable energy and clean water to Ouagadougou, starting strategic projects in remote areas. A secret team of experts from Mali, Niger, and Guinea was sent to learn how to build a new type of technocratic government that Traoré was piloting, combining the military, technology, and young intellectuals. All of this caused the Western media to change its tune. They no longer talk about coup, revolution, or lack of democracy. Now they talk about the Traoré model as a phenomenon worth watching. If Traoré is not overthrown in the next 6 months, the whole of West Africa will follow his path. Foreign Policy, July 2025. Pressure reaches a peak, and Traoré makes his final move. On June 25, the French Foreign Ministry summoned Burkina Faso's ambassador and issued an indirect ultimatum. Ouagadougou needs to be more transparent about its relations with non-NATO powers. On June 26, major international television channels simultaneously broadcast satellite images claiming that Burkina Faso was building facilities that could be linked to the militarization of the region. On June 27, the Security Council met behind closed doors, referring to the situation of potential instability in the Sahel due to non-traditional factors. By then, everyone understood, a direct blow was imminent. But Traoré did not retreat. On the contrary, he went straight to the people and read an unexpected message. I do not want war. But I will not allow a false peace. We, Burkina Faso, will take the initiative to create our own destiny. Excerpt from the speech of June 28, 2025. The underground earthquake, the plan to overthrow the world begins. Immediately after that speech, the media had only one topic. What is Burkina Faso doing? And why are Cuba and Denmark still there? Not withdrawing. A leaked strategic memorandum, titled, The Three-Pronged Alliance, Cuba, Scandinavia, Sahel. The content is unconfirmed, but if it is true, it will be a plan to restructure the supply, defense, information, and food chains between 3 seemingly unrelated blocks of countries. And the connecting point, still Ouagadougou. End of Part 5. Outside, the world watches a small, poor country making unthinkable moves. But inside, everything has changed. Burkina Faso is no longer a place for pity. It is a battlefield where a new order is being written. But then, in a moment when it seemed like absolute victory, everything suddenly turned around. All the daytime news reports talk about Traoré as a genius strategist who pulled Cuba out of the geopolitical quiet zone, dragged Denmark back to the heart of Africa, rebuilt a world without aid but full of dignity. But when the television lights went out, and the handshakes outside the conference retreated, the night began to tell the truth. At 2:17 a.m., a secret report from Burkina Faso's internal security forces leaked, and for the first time, people learned that not everyone was drawn to Traoré by ideology. An agent believed to be from a Western intelligence agency, disguised as a diplomat, had infiltrated the European Economic Advisory Team. His identity was not made public, but his route, full of questions. From Copenhagen to Ouagadougou. From Denmark to the heart of the revolution. And it was he who, according to encrypted recordings, repeatedly persuaded some of the technical officials in Traoré's new system to transfer the design rights to civilian data surveillance systems, something the young president had always refused to release internationally. This was not just an economic conspiracy. It was a rift in the heart of the revolution. The counterattack in the dark. Traoré had lived through enough war to know, bullets kill people. But betrayal kills a nation. Within 48 hours of the leak, he issued a special decree. All foreign advisory groups were suspended for 72 hours. National cybersecurity was put on red alert. 3 technical officials, once hailed as the new generation, were detained for investigation. The whole country held its breath. For the first time, Traoré's fans began to sense, behind the halo, a dark shadow was creeping. The cold truth of diplomacy. No one in the Danish delegation was formally charged. There was no expulsion. Traoré knew he could not drive out an entire nation because of one spy, but he also knew that from now on, he would be left with only himself. Alone with his ideals. Alone against an old system that was trying to revive itself. He said in an internal meeting on the morning of June 17. We thought that freedom came from handshakes. No. Freedom comes only when we are sober enough to know which hand is real and which is a knife. The first, but not the last, crack. This incident did not kill the revolution. But it shattered the frosted glass of illusion. Traoré still stood firm, but in the skepticism of those who had believed that he was surrounded by an aura of invulnerability. And somewhere beyond the borders, the forces that had failed in the coup began to smile again. The first crack had appeared. The question is, who will tear it apart? Or will Traoré himself, with his bloody hands, mend it before it is too late? We are about to enter the final act, where there is no room for compromise. Go forward, or fall. When the eyes of Cuba and Denmark follow the same red dot in the sun-scorched Sahel, it is no longer a small country called Burkina Faso. It is a symbol. A fire. A redefinition of the era. Traoré does not ask for permission. Traoré does not bow. Traoré does not need approval. And so he did what no one dared to dream. Bringing the most distant lands closer together, not with dollars, but with dignity. Denmark, cold, icy, in the heart of technocratic Europe. Cuba, burning, once anti-American. Once held its head high for a century. Where do they meet? In Traoré. In Burkina Faso. In the future of a continent torn apart. Do you feel something moving? Do you hear the rumble of the earth in the Sahel? If you do, speak up. Like. Comment. Share. Because history doesn't wait. And Africa is rewriting its destiny. Traoré has begun. Now it's our turn.